how do you stay looking good and moving?
And
We'll break the ice a little
like
bit.
you make it my day, right?
No, seriously, because you're moving like 20 years younger than what you are. So, like, what is your regimen? What do you have going on?
First I suppose it begins with genes, you know what I mean? But I think the other thing, Crystal, is that I tried to take care of myself when I was younger. Like I never smoked, I never drank. I was a runner. Obviously I played basketball, in high school and college. And then, for years after that. But I was always like exercising. I try to eat, fairly
Fairly
well.
well, yeah.
These days, I have both an elliptical, and I also try to get in like normally about 2.2 miles like a day, just
Okay.
walking.
Yeah.
And then I do a lot with word games and all of that, and also I'm still like reading. And then obviously I have the opportunity to come up here to the school and interact with the students. And so, I just been blessed. I mean, any of us who are at this point in our lives and we can, like people say, get up every day.
Right.
And, most of your minds and you feel like it's a pretty good day.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of like your athletic, history, but also just keeping your mind going, like you said.
Yeah, and also, trying to learn from younger people. Because, people talk a lot about, older people are supposed to like tell younger people. But I believe in intergenerational learning. So there are things that I can learn from you just as there's things that you can learn from me. You just have to have like an open mind, you know what I'm saying? And so, I try to always like function that way. And so that helps me to try to understand, although like for example, when I'm on TikTok, I know that there's certain things that are going on there that
Wait, pause.
Right.
For you to even say you're on TikTok just shows how cool you are.
Yeah, like there's sort of a couple of things when you're on TikTok, at least for me, right? Number one, you can't. A lot of that stuff is, as you know, made up. Some of it's AI. You never know what's real. But I spoke in Selma, Alabama, weekend before last, right? And I was trying to explain that you see some of the worst of Black people on TikTok. And I have to keep reminding myself that is not who we are.
Yeah.
You know how people talk about, Black culture, and you see stuff that people say, this is part of our culture. And what I'm saying, at the very least, it may be one element of our culture, but it's not the totality of our culture, right? Because if you start thinking that what you see there is who we are as a people, it could become very depressing, right? And so, in my mind, you have to look at certain things that are happening, understand that they're happening, but also know that there are other things that are happening. It's just like when we look at our young people, and you look at some of the worst things that our young people do, but that's a smaller percentage of our young people, right? Because there are young people out here who are obviously doing great things. So it's like trying to understand the world like in that way.
Right, yeah. How do you, because that's a great point, like how do you help people to mentally shift to think like that? Because even bringing up the young people, they could just focus on the young people that are just not doing great things. Right. And we're here at your school. And again, I've worked for you before, so I know that there are young people that are doing great things. We sending students to and through college, right. 100%, right. College acceptance. Right. That's the history you have in education. So how do we shift the mentality to look at it from both sides?
It's difficult because social media is like a blessing and a curse, right? Because to a certain extent, there's certain things you learn out there because of social media on the positive side, right? But then there's all of this negativity that you're bombarded with, every single day. And our young people, our students are bombarded with that stuff, beginning probably in middle school. I mean, so you're fighting kind of an uphill battle. And what I believe is that in order to fight this type of battle, you yourself have to be grounded in who you are. What is it that you stand for? Like, what is your why?
Yeah.
And if you're not grounded, it's very difficult for you to try to pass a message on to particularly, our students on what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. And so for me, it's nothing is given out here, right? It's like you got to have a constant thirst for knowledge, a constant. I want to get better every day, because I mean I'm 84, but I don't think like, oh, okay, so I know everything. I think the moment you think you know everything is when you're at your dumbest, because you'll never know everything, right?
Yeah.
And so you can constantly be learning. And so what I would say to answer your question is, I try to learn both from a theoretical standpoint, and what I mean by that is by reading, like books, and then you try to learn from your experience, right? Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to be either an ideologue or a pragmatist. And what I mean by that is you don't want to base everything that you do just based on your experience. You also don't want to base everything that you do just based on theory or ideas, right? It's that dialectical relationship between theory and practice, right? That you always want to be improving your theory, because that'll help you improve your practice. But if you improve your practice, it's going to expand your ideological perspective, right? So it's like constantly trying to function in both of those realms, right? And, it's just sort of how I approach my life.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we live in a society today where some people, AI, when I typed in your name on AI, they say you're known for education. You're an educator,
Right.
Education reform, civil rights activist, and when it comes to education, some people feel that sometimes like it's not really necessary, or I don't have to go to school, or I don't have to, so I like the fact that you brought that up, that theoretically it's still important. It's still important to read a book.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
and it's also important to have the experience. So, coupling that together.
Yeah, and so, let's go back to AI. So AI is a tremendous tool, right? And we're only at the beginning of what it's going to do. But like I was having a conversation with someone who's trying to, because I'm working on this reading initiative, which I'm happy to explain.
Okay.
But they were saying, well, our kids don't need to know how to read because you got AI. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, right? Because I mean, AI, you still got to be able to read. You got to be able to comprehend.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like I put my name in AI too, and there's a lot of stuff in there that's not correct. Or I was thinking about something I wanted to do, and so I put the prompts in the AI, and it came back. But then you still got to look at it.
Right.
You got to analyze it. You got to figure out, okay, what about this do I need to change? It doesn't. You can go back in there and say, well, do this better. And so you can keep using it depending upon which AI tool you're using, right? Because there's this one that if you were going to write a book, for example, it'll literally write the book for you, right? But even when you put the stuff in there, you got to go back in there and say, okay, but I wanted more on this scene, or I wanted this person. So even how you use those tools, it still comes back to your ability to read, to write, to think, to analyze, and to compute. And when you're reading is about, particularly with our young kids trying to learn how to read, it's about phonics, it's about phonemic awareness, it's about vocabulary, it's about spelling, but it's also about comprehension.
Yeah.
Because if you're reading something on AI and you don't comprehend it,
right.
What what does that mean? And so every society has faced technological advancement, right? And every period of society's history, that technological advancement is is much deeper than the previous. So we've never seen anything like AI. We don't know what's going to come after AI, right? But there's a thing called cultural lag. And what that is that you have technological change, but the society's ability to catch up to the technological change lags behind the technological change. What the problem that we have today is the technological advancements are so fast that it's hard for the culture to catch up, with the technological change, right? In the past, you didn't have the speed of technological change. And so even though it took time for the culture to catch up, you were more likely to be able to catch up because it might be years before you see another radical technological innovation. But in today's world, it's so rapid that it makes it more difficult for us to align as a culture with the technological change.
How do we address that in education?
You know what? I don't know. I mean, I honestly think that what's facing educators today is so much more, complex, right? But like every technological advancement, like believe it or not, Crystal, back in the day, when the radio was first invented, I remember reading this book. There were people who were saying we no longer need teachers because you got the radio. Then obviously when TV came, we no longer need teachers. So at every point in time, you've had a technological advancement, and the argument's been, well, we no longer need teachers. Well, and in each period of history, that proved not to be true. But what it does do is change how teachers have to function, right? And so I know that teachers must be grappling today with AI because, did this kid write this paper or did they just do it on AI? And then you can't say, well, you can't use AI because that doesn't make sense. So the struggle is to figure out how do we use AI in a way that advances what it is that we're trying to do educationally, but it doesn't skip certain steps that are still necessary, I think, in order for us to use that technology, to the fullest.
Right.
And so I can imagine what teachers are thinking about today, right? But even as I understand that reality, I'm sitting here and we're sitting here in a city where black children, young black children, have some of the lowest reading scores in the United States of America. And we're sitting here with one or two generations of teachers who have never been given the tools to teach our children how to read. And AI ain't gonna solve that problem, right? We're still gonna have to go back and get back into evidence-based instruction, right? Like because there's like 40 or 50 years of research on this is what you need to do in order to teach reading. And so even though you've got all of these levels of technological advancement, if we're dealing with 5-year-old kindergartners through 3rd grade or 4th grade or 5th grade or whatever it is, if we don't teach them how to read, they're not going to be able to take advantage of the advances in technology, right? So at least in my mind, those things still remain true.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense because even though we're using these tools, you still have to comprehend. You still have to know to type in what you need and how to, process it and comprehend it and put it together and things like that. That is so true.
Yeah, because AI can only
do so much.
So much. Right? It's what you put into the prompts, right? If you put garbage into the prompts, you're gonna get garbage, right? And so you still gotta understand how to
you still have to have some intellect.
Right? Yeah, you have to be thinking about it. Right?
So put it in. That is so true. That is so true. So when it started coming about, like did it blow you off your rocker or
when I first the first time I heard about it. But I'm gonna use something and this is gonna be crazy, but I will use an example. But the first time I heard NWA, you know, that was really the first time I had heard gangster rap. Right? It was I'm trying to remember the name. It was like Coming from Compton or something, right?
Or like Straight Outta Compton.
Straight out of Compton. And I had no, you know, so the first time I heard it, I was like, what?
Yeah.
This is what and now look at,
right.
and it's so what I'm saying is that when these things hit like that, you know, you got a whole generation of people whose immediate response is, they didn't get rid of that. Well, yeah, but they ain't gonna get rid of that, right? So you out there talking about they need to get rid of that. It doesn't. It's not gonna affect anything. So you gotta start figuring out. Okay, this is gonna be here. Like, and so now we gotta figure out what we're gonna do. Because I tell people all the time, because you can't teach kids that used to be there or kids you wish were there. You got to teach the kids who are actually there, right? Or you can't live in a world that used to be a world you wish. You gotta live in a world that is, right? So for example, we're dealing with Donald Trump, right? But it's not just Donald Trump as a person. It's what Trump is doing represents. And one of the values of understanding history is you understand that we've been through this before, but it can never be exactly like this. And what I mean by that is history doesn't repeat itself like in a circle like that. It repeats itself like this. So you'll see something over here that happened over here, but now this is happening under a different set of historical circumstances. So to explain what I mean, like, you know, during COVID, I finally read Black Reconstruction by Du Bois, which I've been trying to read for years and years and years. But it's like 700 and some pages, right?
I gotta put that on my list.
Yeah, but it is worth reading. And the point I'm trying to make is that right after Lincoln was assassinated and Johnson took over, Johnson was what Trump is. But the difference is
Lyndon Johnson.
No, Johnson, Andrew, the president who took over right after Lincoln was killed, right? And so if you look at what he did and what he represented, you'll see it in him. The difference was he didn't have truth social. He didn't, you know, to spew his hatred and his white supremacist views, he had to get on a train and go from place to place, right? So what I'm saying is, because I understand history, I know some of this has happened before, right? The destruction of things that we have fought for years, right? If you understand what happened in the post-Reconstruction period, you understand that during Reconstruction, there was this period when Black people did certain things. The post-Reconstruction period was about destroying that which, you know, we accomplished during the Reconstruction period. And so you see this this effort to wipe away gains. And what I'm trying to get people to see is this has happened to us before.
Yeah.
It's happening to us now. So you have to deal with it based on the world that we're currently in, right? So the circumstances, the historical circumstances are different. Although some of the actions that are taking place come from a place that has been there before.
Thank you for that history, because we need that, because in this time, the generation, some people are just like, I'm checking out. Right. You know, you have Black women that says like, I've done enough. You have generations as a whole that just says this is too much for me. But we always need that historical reminder. We've been here before. Right,
and we've survived.
And we survived.
But we've survived because we had a strategy, not necessarily a single strategy. So for me, for example, during a period like this, so what I'm saying to people is, look, every Black organization needs to look internally, and we need to ask ourselves, are we clear about our mission? Are we organized in the most effective way? Do we understand what is coming at us But even if we understood it and our organizations are not tight, we're not going to be able to both resist, because it's both a resistance and then a moving forward. It can't just be a defensive strategy. You know, we got to have both a defensive strategy and an offensive strategy, right? So you got to like be able to resist and to protect, but you also got to be able to advance. And what I'm suggesting is, in order to do that, you have to be able to understand the external realities, but then you also have to look internally. So let me give you just a specific example having to do with education. Forget Trump and everything just for a moment. So here's what's happening in the city of Milwaukee, and it's something I'm trying to get, you know, Black people in particular to understand. So between 2004 and 2023, the elementary and secondary age population in the city dropped by 13%. They are expecting by 2030 for there to be, I think it's 29% fewer first graders. Okay, 2030 is only 5 years from now. Think about what the implications of that are. So years ago, so people like myself and others were telling young Black girls, you need to quit having all these babies. Well, they did. And so now there are fewer kids on the north side of Milwaukee. We always have to think about even something that is a good thing, it has an impact. And some of the impact can be unintended negative consequences, right? So now if you look at it, Crystal, just think about this. Washington High School had an enrollment of 400 and something kids. North got about 320.
Today.
Today. This is just enrollment. Yeah. We're not talking about who actually walks in there on
and attends school every day.
Yeah, we're just talking about signed up, right? Then you start looking at some of the schools that were controlled by Black people. So in 2009, I did a study, and there was about 46 private schools, charter schools, that were controlled by Black people, and one partnership school. That's a SADA that Rose Massey started, and her daughter Carlotta runs now. Today, there's less than 14. Wow. And what we got to look at is that we got schools with less than 100 kids enrolled. And when you start looking at the difference in the per pupil between MPS, charter schools, and private schools, particularly after MPS went out for the referendum, that per pupil, the gap has widened. And so what I'm saying to people is, you got to step back for a moment and say, wait, how are we going to be able to survive? Because it's going to be very difficult, I think, to have a really good school with 150 some kids. And what it has to do with is there's as you know, the business side of education, right? And that's the revenue part. How are you going to get enough revenue to provide the needed services for those kids? These are real questions, right? That did not exist 10 years ago in the way that they exist now. Yeah. And so that's what I mean by you got to stop for a moment and look at what are the current conditions that we face, and what are we going to do about it?
Right? This is the reality.
Yeah, it's just a cold-blooded reality, and it's not ideological. It's more just I would use the word realism, right? Because demographics impact what it is we're trying to do. So one of the reasons here at HFCA that we're consolidating. I mean, when HFCA last year merged with Milwaukee Excellence or acquired or whatever, here's the reality we were facing. We had 350 some kids. They had 350 some kids, right? We're either going to compete, and one of us is not going to survive, right? Yeah. And so the reality of it was that both entities had to sit down in a cold-blooded way and say, look, here are the advantages of us coming together versus us staying apart, right? It's now in the end, people could have, said, well, we don't want to lose our name, and these are all important issues. I'm not, we want to keep this, we want to keep that. But, people were able to sit down and say, look, I mean, you have these strengths, we've got these strengths, right? We've got these weaknesses, you got it. Because every one of us got weaknesses, right? And so does it make more sense for us to come together and try to build on the strengths that we have? Because we're not going to be able to do it separately.
Right.
And for me, these are the types of real difficult decisions that people are going to have to make.
Mm-hmm. How much flack did you, if any, did you catch from that merging?
We didn't really, we really didn't catch any flack. It was just the process of doing it. And now that we just, acquired, merged with Central City Cyber School, we're now a K through 12 school. Mm-hmm. But the difficulty that people like Rodney are going to face is you're trying to bring 3 different organizations together, right? That's a fact. Mm-hmm. And you're trying to create a single culture. You and I know there's no institution in the world, no matter what kind it is, that there ain't going to be problems.
Right.
People don't like each other. Just all of the things, right? Yeah. It's all of the things, right? And at the same time, you got the kids who are coming and their families. So you got all of these things that you're trying to deal with. But in order for us to try to do what we're trying to do, we have to deal with those things. And we've been blessed in the fact that, 5 or 6 years ago, I had like a succession plan. Because I actually believe so that a lot of times in our communities, and maybe other communities too, I just know our community.
It's true.
People try to hang on, you know what I mean? And then, people start having meetings like, is he ever going to leave? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so,
you don't want that to be your story.
No, something like that. No. You always want to kind of leave on your own terms, right? You don't want people to be like pushing you out the door. You know what I mean? Like, we're here, but
no, we wouldn't push you out.
No, you would. So, but it was my job not to even create the conditions that would necessitate that, right? Mm-hmm. So we were so fortunate that Michelle Nettles was willing to say, okay, I'm willing to take over, chair of the board, right? And so what's really interesting, although my name is on the schools now, I'm no longer on the board. I don't have any formal relationship with the school. Rodney Link is the president CEO, and we have an understanding that call me, if you need something from me, right? Because I'm not, I'm gonna come up here a lot to be with the kids, but I'm not involved. And if people start coming with problems, right, I tell them, look, don't tell me anything you don't want me to tell Rodney verbatim, right? Mm-hmm. So your best thing is don't talk to me, talk to him. Because if you don't create situations like that, you know how that goes, right? The founder, co-founder, whatever it is, right? Hanging on, people talking to them, and then that becomes like a place to bring gripes and problems and all of that. We can't do that to each other, Crystal. So my job at this point in history is to be here if they need help, to obviously continue to try to raise money, and then to have some type of relationship to the degree that I can with students, right? So I come up here, I go over to the middle school, now I'll go over to the elementary school, Because I want the kids to see that the person who's on the
You want them
building
to-
is actually
you're
walking
right.
around.
Yeah,
right?
you want them to have
Yeah,
some
and you can
connection
talk
to
to
you.
them, right?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, you're
'Cause,
very
like,
great at that.
Yeah, like so when I first went over to middle school, the kids were like kind of scared, to
Yeah.
come up and talk to you. Are you really, and so you want them to like feel,
connection,
positive,
yeah.
and most important, like, what the mural on the wall says, you want them to feel love, right? Because that's the kind of entity that we're, trying to create over here.
How did you know to have that type of mind frame and leadership? Because HFCA is not the first, Dr. Howard Fuller first, it was CEO Leadership Academy.
Right.
This is not your first thing that you just, started.
Right.
The Malcolm X.
Yeah.
We can talk about it. I know about you, Dr. Fuller.
I see. You should read my book.
I have it.
So, check it out.
It's still on my list
check it
to
out.
really go through it, but I have it. So you're not new to this. So how did you know, as far as leadership, to say, you know what, this is the time,
Right.
and just, I just want to make sure that things are set in place,
Right.
so I can continue to, do what I'm called to do as a reformer, as an activist, making sure that I engage with students, but also making sure that I'm handing the torch over.
Right. You know what I think it is? I think it's like what happened to me when I was younger. And, because I remember an old dude telling me one time, because I was running my mouth, and he was like, young man, I got socks older than you. And I was like, hey man, somebody need to take you shopping if you got socks older than me. But, I understood how younger people were being treated. And I said to myself, I never want to be like that. I want to be like respectful of younger people. I want them to understand that I honestly do believe that there's stuff that I can learn from younger people, but also that there is a point in time when you need to step aside, but you want to do it in a way that's constructive, right? Not destructive, because you've seen times when you have to drag people away, people form camps, and it just destroys the entity, right? Or younger people get to the point where they're like, I gotta go form my own church because he or she, what I mean, all of that, and so I know that playbook, right? And I've developed so many organizations, like in my lifetime, I've been blessed to do that. There's 3 or 4 that I helped form that are still going on, like around the country. But as far as HFCA, it was just clear to me that you have to have a clear plan of succession. And like I said, we were so fortunate to get Michelle to be willing to step up to the plate. So it was an easy way to do it is that, Michelle's on the board. I forgot for how many years. I've, known Michelle and Corey forever and have so much respect and love for them. And so that, when I talked to her, like, hey, Michelle, like, are you willing to take over? There came a point where, okay, now is the time. Then my job was to be fully supportive of her.
Right.
So I'll give you an example. So when we were in the building over on Capitol Drive, it was clear that we needed a new building because we needed to grow, right? Because we were restricted in terms of how many kids could get in that building, what we could offer. There were no windows in the building, there was no gym, all of those things that we felt that you needed to have in a high school. So the astronautics building was available. So that's the building that's over there by McDonald's on Capitol Drive, Teutonia. Okay. It used to be Blue Cross Blue Shield when I grew up, but they sold it to a company called Astronautics. And so it's a huge building. And so the purchase price for it was $1.7 million, right? So once again, like I was saying, okay, let's purchase this building and then renovate it. And we had enough property to build a gym like on the side, right? But Michelle was like, no, 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 no. Let's stick a flag in the ground and let's build building from the ground up. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
but my job was to say, okay, Michelle, let me, what do I need
How
to
can I
do?
help? Yeah.
Right? And so one of the first things I was able to do was to go out to a friend of mine in California who gave us like $5 million on a matching, to get done. And then, with Michelle came Corey. And so, we put together this powerful capital campaign committee led by Corey Nettles, Patty Godoran, and Thelma Sides, right? And so, because of Kevin Newell, like the people who did Thrive On, across the street, they had access to this particular property. They gifted the property to us. It had a warehouse on it, and we had to tear it down and all that. But Michelle's idea was we need to build a brand new building from the ground up, right? My job was to say, okay, Madam Chair, let me use every resource that I have, to help. So what we were able to do was we were able to raise, I think it was $36 to $38 million, right? To both build this brand new state-of-the-art high school, to renovate the middle school. So that building on Capitol Drive, we tore half of it down, built a brand new gym. We have a recording studio in the middle school, just like the one that we have
here. Yeah, I
it's just a little smaller.
Okay.
But it's the same thing, right? And we were able to do all of this, Crystal, with no debt. And so I feel good about the fact that we haven't passed on to Rodney and the next generation a huge debt. But that was because of all of the people in this community who support us. There's this woman named Mary Ellen Stanek, for example, who's just been relentless. There are families who didn't have to give us money, like the Kellners, Dick Abdu. I mean, I can just go down because there's a whole wall of people who gave us money. I've been friends with Christy Walton, who's one of the most richest women in the world, because I was friends with her husband, John Walton, who's the son of Sam Walton, who founded Walmart, right?
Yeah.
So, what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I've been blessed to be, to have those types of friendships.
Because you're a great guy.
Yeah, well, and those people have given millions of dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, for us to do what we have to do, right? And so that's one of the things that I'm concerned about, particularly on the north side, because only a few of us have the social capital that's necessary to raise the level of resources that you need in order to do some of the stuff we're talking about doing. I mean, the last thing, I've been blessed that a lot of young leaders like yourself and others want to meet with me to talk about their leadership journeys and stuff like that. And if I have a concern, one of them is, and this is a good thing, that your generation is much more entrepreneurial than my generation, right? That's a positive. The downside of that is everybody want to have their own organization, right? And so you get a whole bunch of small organizations that, just like the schools that we talked about, they're not going to be able to survive, right? But coming together, and some of them are doing, the same stuff, with slight variations, but everybody wants to, and I understand that, say, I'm the founder, blah, blah, blah. But over the next few years, a lot of those organizations, because funding is going to dry up, the attack on DI, all of these things that are happening are going to create situations where
we're going to have to come together,
or you're not going to survive.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's just a fact.
And is your concern because of how some of us may think that we're not going to come together.
Exactly. And I understand. I'm not being negative. I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do.
Right.
I'm just saying from when I look at it, this is what I see. Because I know that in a given community, there's only so many organizations you could have doing the same thing, right? Because where will you get the resources from? And you and I know you can talk all you want, you have all of the best ideas in the world, but you don't got no money, to implement those ideas. They're just ideas, right? And I understand. I mean, I want everybody to do well, so you can do good. Because I say to people all the time, you can do both. You can do well, but you can also do good, right? So I want people to have a great life. I want them to have salaries and benefits and whatever that will help them and their family have a really good life. But the reality of it is, there's not unlimited money in a community, particularly when you're dealing with both for-profits and nonprofits, but particularly on the nonprofit side of the ledger, right? You're dependent on revenue streams from somebody. It's either fee for service or grants or loans or whatever, right? And there's only so much of that. In like a given community for a set of services, and so. People are going to have to talk about that.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's some things for us to think about. Right. Yeah, because it's we are more entrepreneurial in this day and time, but we do still have to have that mindset of like, how can we come together?
Right, or even if you don't merge,
right?
It's are there ways where we could do? I'm gonna just use collective purchases. In other words. Are there any kind of ways where we can network on the business side, if not on the service side, right? Or even if you look at the service side, you could look at, say, well, we do this, which is slightly different than what you're doing. I could see a way where if we work together, what you're doing, there would be a way to collaborate, because there's synergism between what you're doing and I'm doing, right? And then in that way, you could help each other on the revenue side. It's just being creative. Is what I would say.
I agree. Yeah, it's nothing wrong with definitely having your own, but just being creative, being logical, because like you said, how are we going to sustain?
Yeah, right. Because it's all about sustainability.
It's about sustainability.
It is.
No matter how you flip it or fry it.
At the end, right? It's how do I sustain this? How do I sustain this over 20 years, 30 years? I mean, one of the things I'm most proud of is that, as you know, our school is now 21 years old, right? And, Kwame and Ford and Sharon, they've been here forever, right? But, and we talked about the dark days, like when we first started, right? But now we're 21 years old. So. Yeah.
And I want to speak to that, because you have people that support you since the beginning, people you just mentioned. And then you also have students who attended, and now they're teachers.
Right.
And that goes back to you talking about the intergenerational, connection with people, learning from people. Why do you think that people support Dr. Howard Fuller?
I hope it's because they see something in the entity that speaks to them, right? So to me, the way you build and sustain, one way you build and sustain institutions, particularly like schools, is that you want some of the people who went through it to come back to it, right? And lend their skills. It's just like how we talk about, you want young people to go away to college, but to come back to Milwaukee to try to help build the community. Well, the same thing applies for institutions. If you're fortunate enough to have people who graduate and then they come back.
Mm-hmm.
But it's both a good thing and it can also be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, you know, people will have a tendency to come back and say, it's not like it was when I was here. And what I say to people is, if it was like it was when you was here, it probably wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you know that's you got to understand that things have to change. What you've got to see is, are these changes that I can live with, or are these changes that make it not possible for me to stay?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the things I've been saying to people in professional development sessions I've been invited to do, you know, with schools starting again, is I think every place is not meant for everybody. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person, or doesn't mean that the people who are in leadership or whatever, that they're bad people. It just means that for whatever reason, it doesn't work for you. And so, to me, you have to try to talk to people who are in charge about what your concerns are. But if for whatever reason they don't meet those concerns, instead of you staying there and becoming a cancer inside the organization, it's best to just leave.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's best to get, you don't go somewhere else, right? Where whatever your needs and concerns are, they can be met. It could mean that the place you're leaving is the things they're doing are not right. Or it could just be that they're doing something that isn't wrong. It just isn't the way that you would do it, you know?
Yeah.
And I will always believe, I mean, even when I resigned from being the superintendent, I could have stayed there and forced them to buy me out, because I just signed a new 2-year contract, right? But I felt like it was unethical for me to say, okay, y'all need to buy me out, right? It was like the new board is not a board that I want to work for. And I don't want to force y'all to give me $400,000 like Alan Brown got, because that's $400,000 that I felt I would have been taken away from the kids, right? So what I did was just say, hey, I'm resigning. You don't have to buy out my contract. I'm just going to resign. Okay. The only thing you owe me is, you know, through the time that I worked and any kind of sick, you know, whatever. Yeah. And that's it. I mean, I could have stayed there and just, you know, made stuff horrible for everybody, but I just, why do that, right?
Yeah, and then we wouldn't have all of this.
Yeah.
we wouldn't be where we're at today.
Yeah, but you know how people are, you know, like, there's being in a leadership role, either to lead your own entity or to lead an institution, it's hard, right? And none of us are perfect, right? None of us can do this without making mistakes and all of that, right? But the issue for me always is, do you buy into the mission? Is whatever your concerns are they so like horrible? Or are there parts of it that you can negotiate and keep going? But I don't believe anybody should come to a job where they're in pain. You know what I mean? Where it's like ripping away your soul. Yeah. You know, to come in there. You know the feeling I'm talking about. Yeah. So to me, like when you get to that point, man, you need to like bounce.
You gotta figure it out.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Because there's gotta be another place out in the world that whatever your mission in life is, that you can find a way to work on that mission. So.
Yeah, that's how you feel about it.
Yeah, that's just sort of how I approach the world. You know,
So how can we I would, say, what do you want your legacy to be, and all the things. But this is your legacy. We're sitting in it. I'm grateful to be a part of it. You every time I come around, you're a part of this. And I try to do my part in what I'm doing in education to continue that, to build on that, whatever that looks like for me.
Right.
So even speaking to me and other leaders and people who are for education, how can we continue to honor you?
Right.
And just overall, move the needle in education, not even thinking about what's going on, because there's so much going on.
Right. So I'm probably going to talk out of both sides of my mouth to answer this question. So I'm just warning.
Okay.
So I feel some kind of way about this whole legacy thing, and let me explain why. Like, I never want decisions to be made based on protecting, quote, my legacy. I want decisions to be made based on what is best for the children and the staff and whatever who are working right then and there. Because what I worry about, because sometimes people get so concerned about their legacy that they start making decisions based on protecting a legacy as opposed to making decisions based on what is needed at that moment in time, right? And so the fact of the matter is, you don't owe me anything. Nobody owes me anything. And I really do mean that. Because whatever I did, I was supposed to do it. What I'm saying is, I've always tried to, and this is where I kind of talk out of the other side of my mouth. I've always tried to understand that I'm standing on the shoulders of, Mary McLeod Bethune, and go back, right? That I'm still trying to make my mother and my grandmother proud, of who I am as a person and the person, that they raised. And so this work that I'm still trying to do out here, that is what is important. And I do honestly appreciate what you said, as it pertains to me. It is still like a humbling experience to walk over here and see your name on a building, to see kids with your name on the shirt. It's like, it really is like.
What goes through your head?
It's kind of weird, like I'm kind of like, I try to, but you can't.
Because you're such a tall figure, like literally.
But you can't get into that per se, right? I mean, I just speak for myself. I mean, I'm humbled. I appreciate it. It's an honor, but we got to get on with the work. You know what I mean? And the work is, how do we give these kids the best education possible? The work is, how do we create the best work environment for the people who work here? It's both of those things, right? I know that people are not going to be happy coming in here every single day, but you don't want them to feel horrible about coming. You don't want the kids to feel that way. You don't want the people who work here to feel that way. There's every day something is going to go wrong, right? But every day something is going to go right. And so what we have to do is to build on the assets. It's just like when you teach kids. You don't teach kids by focusing on their deficits. You start first by trying to understand what assets are these kids going, because it's those assets that I need to use to help them with the challenges, right? Rather than the other way around. Because if you see kids and all you see are deficits, you don't see no assets. It's very difficult to really work with those kids, right? So you got to be able to see the assets that these kids bring. And you got to understand their quote deficits or challenges, right? And so the long and short of it is, I feel like I've been truly blessed. I mean, I really do mean that, to live the life that I've been able to live. And so all I want people to do is to keep working. You know what I mean?
Just simply put.
Yeah, just stay at it. Just keep seeing the genius that's in these children, and try to bring it out, right? Try to figure out how to make sure that we can give them the type of education that gives them a chance to have a decent life, right? Because ultimately, this is what it's about. I mean, I look at my life, and I lived, I've been blessed. I mean, there's no question about it. But I grew up, on these same streets, right? Mm-hmm. When I was living in Hillside, I wasn't sitting down there thinking, oh, I'm gonna be the superintendent. Right. Or I'm going to travel to New Zealand, to Tanzania, to England, to France, to Sweden. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go all over the world. You're not thinking about that.
You're just helping the president write speeches. All the things you've done.
You're just you're not thinking about any of that, right?
No.
But ultimately, what got me into those positions was education, right? As I keep coming, because I
and you still believe. I know you still believe it's a form of liberation.
Yeah, it is. I mean, because if you can liberate your mind, right? If you can train yourself to be able to think, to be able to analyze, and if you can't be risk adverse, and what I mean by that is, you got to be willing to take risks to make change, right? You can't be afraid of what's going to happen on the other side, right? Because no matter what you create, there's going to be a new set of problems. Every new thing generates a new set of problems, right? It just does, right? Now, you hope they're different, and you know what I mean, and you hope you have a mechanism to solve them. But it's like I used to do sessions on leap before you look. Because people will tell you all the time, you gotta look real hard before you leap, right? I used to do these sessions on, no, you know what you gotta do is you gotta leap. Because if you stand up there and you look too long, you will never leap. Mm-hmm. And if you leap, there's going to be a much more of an emergency to find answers. You know what I mean? Because now I'm out here, right? Yeah. I got to find it. I figure it out. Yeah, I got to figure this out because I'm no longer standing up here on the thing, right? Thinking I didn't jumped off this cliff. I better figure out something, right?
Yeah, gotta learn how to swim.
Yeah, I gotta learn how to do something. Mm-hmm. In order to survive. So, it's those kind of things. But those are the things, though. I think honestly, that make for a more both. I'm gonna use the word joyful and exciting life. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? As opposed to like a dull life.
Yeah.
Like. I really feel like every day you gotta get up and you gotta attack life. Right? You can't let life come to you. Right? Mm-hmm. You gotta go to life and you gotta attack it. Right? No, seriously, like every day, right?
Yeah.
And people, often ask me, first of all, I wouldn't want to live my life over again. People ask me, well, what would you tell your 27-year-old self? The answer is nothing. Yeah. Because I did what I thought I was supposed to do at 27. Yeah. To me, what do you mean? I didn't tell myself nothing, right? You take the weight for whatever decisions you made, right? Mm-hmm. And you gotta move on, right? You can't, I very seldom do I think backwards. Okay. Right? I'm always like trying to be both in the moment and thinking about what's ahead. But at the same time, I'm not one of these people, I learned this from Dan Greco. like when I don't stand up telling kids, I want to educate you because you are our future. No, you are your kids are here right now.
Yeah.
It ain't about their future. It's about their present.
And
right?
that's so true, because that is a typical term that we
Yeah.
use
Oh,
when
yeah,
we're
yeah.
communicating.
Yeah.
In
You are
education.
our future. No. You are currently here right
You are
now.
now.
Right in the present. Right? And actually, if you want to do something that may help their future, you need to address their present.
The present, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or else it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, and I really believe like your way of thinking has helped you continue to evolve through generation and generation and generation. The way you think, if you didn't think that way, you wouldn't have been able to elevate and move and change and reform and all of those things, because you would be stagnant.
Right.
You wouldn't be able to do that.
I think that's right. I mean, I do believe that the only thing that's permanent in the world is change. And change can be good and bad. People say, well, things are changing. It doesn't mean that it's all positive, right? Change can be both positive and negative, right? And so what you got to do is to figure out, what's the positive and what's the negative.
Yeah. So can you leave us with like 2 to 3 books that we should be reading now at this time?
Yeah, so it kind of depends upon what you're trying to do, right? Yeah. So I tell anyone, if you really want to understand Black education, the seminal book is The History of Black Education in the South by James Anderson. This is a book that I go back to over and over and over again. Just because Jim spent about 10 years writing this book. And it really has grounded me in the history of Black education. And one of the things that's helped me do, quite honestly, is to understand the distinction between public education and the system that delivers it. So, for example, when people say, because I support parent choice, I'm anti-public education, that's not true. MPS is not public education. It's only one delivery system for public education. Charters are a delivery system. Vouchers are a financial mechanism to get an education. And so there's, when we decided in this country that the public needed to be educated, there were different systems that got formed to try to make that education happen. And none of these systems were created by God, so they could all be changed, right? So when I look at parent choice, for example, in Milwaukee, parent choice to me is a broad umbrella. And underneath that umbrella are traditional MPS schools, charter schools, private schools, homeschooling, right? These are all options for getting in education. These are options for the public to be educated, right? So Jim's book was like really helpful to me in trying to crystallize that particular point of view. Another book is called Silent Covenants, and this is by Derek Bell. So Derek Bell was one of the great constitutional lawyers of our time. So Derek Bell was back there with Thurgood Marshall and Robert Carter and all of them in the 30s when they were trying to figure out what should be the strategy. Because what people need to understand, Chris, is that there were some people who believed we should pursue Plessy. So you had Plessy versus Ferguson, right? Separate but equal. Not everybody was like, we should integrate. There were people trying to say, hey, I'm not trying to be with white people. I want to be separate if it could be equal, which in and of itself. So he wrote a book called Silent Covenants. And what's interesting about the book is it helped me understand a way that I try to function. And it's a thing called interest convergence theory. And what it means is this, is that he was trying to explain that the reason why we made progress during the Civil Rights Movement is because the United States was trying to prove to the rest of the world that democracy was a better form of government than communism. Hard to do that with Bull Connor sicking dogs on people. So at a certain point in time, the white rulers called Bull Connor and said, hey man, you gotta quit sicking dogs on people because you're messing up a larger thing. So at that moment in time, our interests converged with their interests, right? And certain things happen. Now, that convergence can never be permanent because we're coming from two totally different worldviews, right? So to be able to understand that concept of interest convergence theory, but even if you understand that, you still have to know the difference between principle and strategy and tactics. So for example, I start out my book with the first chapter is about a meeting I had with the younger George Bush. And so I was down in Texas trying to get a voucher bill passed and meet with some black legislators. So people say, oh, you got to meet with the governor. I was like, I don't want to be. Yeah, no, you got to meet with him. So it ended up being a meeting. There was 4 people in the room. And I was supposed to meet with him like for a half hour. The meeting ended up lasting for an hour and a half, right? And I actually liked George Bush as a person. Because a lot of times when you meet with these governors, they do all the talking. But he was like, I don't understand education, tell me. And he was asking me a whole bunch of questions. And when we got up, leave, he said, hey, I'm going to be the next president of the United States. And I was like, yeah. And I want you to come to Washington with me. You don't want me because I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I don't believe in any of that. And that's when, like what you said, he said, well, will you help me with education? That's when I helped him write those, on the committee to write those 2 speeches that you mentioned, right? So when I got back to Milwaukee, there was a headline in the Journal Sentinel, like, full of working with Bush, right? So all about progressive Fred. You like in bed with the devil. I was like, hey man, I'm sitting alongside the bed. I'm not under the sheets. You know what I mean? So that to me was strategy and tactics. If Donald Trump was to walk in here today and say, I'm gonna give y'all 100 million, I'm leaving. Because for me, meeting with him is a matter of principle. And so for some people, my meeting with Bush was a matter of principle. For me, it was a matter of strategy and tactics. So even though I believe in interest convergence theory, you still have to draw a line. Everybody's still got to understand, where do I draw the line?
Where do you stand?
And so, Silent Covenants, and a book that he wrote called Faces at the Bottom of the Well. It's interesting, Crystal, because it's not a linear book. It's a series of small vignettes. But in the beginning of the book, he talks about the fact that racism is like a permanent part of the American fabric, right? And so based on that, he was interviewing a black woman in Macomb, Mississippi, I think it was, in 1964. And so he was asking her, how come you get up every day? White people got control of the economics, the guns, everything. And what she said was, I'm old and I don't speak for everybody, but God put me on this earth to harass white people. So Derek Bell's books, were important to me. A very interesting book that I read is called Force and Freedom by Callie Jackson. I think that's the name of it, but it's Callie Jackson. What was really interesting about that book for me, Crystal, is I learned that a black woman financed John Brown's attack on Harper's Ferry. And so what that book did was it familiarized me with the work of black abolitionists. Because you pretty much only hear about Frederick Douglass, but there were all of these black abolitionists, like this woman, who financed the attack on Harper's Ferry. So to learn that at this point in my life was like oh my God, how come I didn't know that?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And then, I mentioned Black Reconstruction by Du Bois. I think the value, first of all, I have no understanding how he wrote that book, because without the internet, because he's quoting primary sources, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a tremendous grounding in the history of Black people, particularly during that period of Reconstruction, and sort of what happened, why certain things happened.
Okay.
And then I read this book, Fugitive Pedagogy. That book is interesting because everybody talks about Carter G. Woodson, the miseducation.
Yeah, I've read that one.
But what this young brother did was he went deeper into the organization that Carter G. Woodson put together, and how Black educators back then were organizing, and what led to Black History Week being established. So I found that interesting. Another book is called Lost Education of Horace Tate. And the reason why that book was helpful to me was back in the day, before Black people could get into the NEA and the AFT, they formed their own unions. And they formed their own education organizations, right? And so it was in Georgia, right? So they were talking about how they invited Martin Luther King to speak to their state organization meeting, right? And one of the things that King said was, he said, a lot of my white friends and some of my Black friends talk about integration in terms of numbers. And what King said was, I didn't fight for this to get integrated out of power, which is powerful, because you never hear that part of King, right? It's just like when people say, well, the greatest speech that Martin Luther King ever gave was at the March on Washington. I don't think so. I think the greatest speech he ever gave was at Riverside Church when he came out against the war. Because if you actually go listen, as I have, both listened and read that speech at the same time, I do believe that that's the speech that got him killed. Because of his coming out against the war. And one of the people I got to know was Vincent Harding. And Vincent Harding, I had a conversation with Vincent, and Vincent helped write that speech.
Okay.
And Vincent said, I think this is a speech that got him killed.
Oh.
So, so sometimes if you got some time, it's just to Google that and find both you can hear them, but you can also be reading
it while you hear it.
While you're listening to it. It's very powerful. But like King's book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, is another book where you get into King in like a different way. Or there's a book like Parting of the Waters, for example. So I just spoke down in Selma, which was really emotional for me because I finally got to go across the bridge, for the first time. But one of the chapters on there in Parting the Waters is called The Children's Crusade. And so it's about how all of these young high school and middle school kids filled up the jails during the Birmingham. That's when Bull Connor was sicking dogs on people. And it's one of the things that led to King coming to Birmingham and then writing the letter from the Birmingham jail. Okay. So Parting the Waters, this is pretty long book, but there are parts of it that are really good. Then there's two kind of like short pamphlets. Like one is called Exit, Voice, and Loyalty by a dude named Hirschman. And the reason why that's interesting is he makes an argument for vouchers, even though he opposes them. And he says that if you're in an organization and you have no power to exit, your voice is diminished. But if you're in an organization and you have the power to exit and you decide to stay, that's a deeper form of loyalty, but you're going to be operating with more power. If people know that you have the power to leave something, and your leaving is going to impact them, you're in a much better position of power than you are if you have no ability to leave, right? Or your leaving has no impact on anything. And another one was, it's by a woman named Michelle Foster, and it's like teachers talk about teaching or something like that. And what she did was she interviewed what she called three levels of teachers. New teachers, I think she called them novices, senior teachers, and then teachers who've been there a little bit longer. And what was interesting was she said that when you talk to either of those three teachers, that when integration came, three things happened. Black schools were closed, black teachers lost their jobs, and black teachers' opinions were devalued. It's really powerful. And a lot of what happened during the quote ed reform movement, black schools were closed, black teachers lost their jobs, and black teachers' opinions were devalued. So, I mean, there are other books floating around in my head, but those are just, so of course my book.
Of course. That's the highest recommendation. Of course, a wealth of knowledge that we need to help us to continue to do whatever we're doing. Because whether like our focus is education or anything, I think it helps us to be a well-rounded person. And we live in a time that we need to be tapped into how can we help each other to move forward. We have to be caring about what's going on. We can't be so occupied with a lifestyle that some of us have, garnered, that we miss reaching back.
Yeah, I think if I would leave you or with anything, it's this notion of it's always about continuous improvement, right? It's always about how do I get better? How do I learn more? Like people say, it's not about working hard. It is about working hard, but it's also working smart, right? And it's like trying to really understand the world that you're in and trying to negotiate it. Really, like in a way that you can do well, as I said, but also to do good.
Thank you so much,
Dr.
Fuller.
Thanks for having me.
I can sit here all day and just soak up all your knowledge and all your wisdom. And thank you for just pouring into every person you pour into, every child, man, woman, boy, and girl. And again, I do have to say, I appreciate being a recipient of your love and your education and your teaching and your leadership. And I carry that today. I'll be honest, the best training I've had is working under you. The best training.
Well, that's really nice. And good luck to you as you keep negotiating.
Figuring it out,
You're gonna figure it out. You're gonna figure it out.
I'm just gonna continue to leap, like you said.
You got to, because if you look too long, Crystal, you may miss some great opportunity, right?
That's true. I don't look that long, but sometimes.
No, I get it.
So I'm gonna continue to leap. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.